Hi, welcome back to Future Fast. And once again, we have a very interesting guest, and some of you are perhaps familiar with the name. But before I bring him onto the conversation, thank you so much for following Future Fast, and some of you are sharing your feedback. Really, sincerely appreciate it, and thank you for that. And most of you are following different podcasts. We appreciate it. It does help if you actually subscribe to it rather than come and watch individual podcasts. So please do subscribe and share it and enjoy the ride. We have Viju Parameshwar. Viju, welcome to Future Fast. Viju has been a leader in Indian corporate industry, and also he's been part of global organizations. And he liked to say that he is currently a retired corporate leader, but he's also been in the advisory boards of a couple of academic institutions. But we will hear his journey from his words. Viju, welcome to Future Path.
Thank you, Nandu. Pleasure to be here.
So, my pleasure, actually. So, Viju, can you please start with your journey from perhaps it's good to have a quick start from your academics to how you got into the work, because they're very connected. So perhaps we should start there.
Yeah, well, I went to school in a place called Lawrence School, Lovedale, Nooty. I spent 10 years there. After that, I went to IIT Bombay. I did a bachelor's in chemical engineering. And at the end of that, I did a master's in the US in Syracuse University. It was an interdisciplinary master's based on engineering, but including finance and economics and so on. I had no intention of staying on in the US, unlike everybody else who went there at the time. I was keen to come back and start work in India. I thought this is where I have to make my career, regardless of how difficult it was in those days. There were only 2 or 3 companies worth joining, in a sense. And I then entered what is called the Tata Administrative Service in 1976.
No, but what was your motivation to come back? Unlike most of your
well, I was keen to go to the US after IIT, and I was very clear that I was not going there for any particular great input on education. It was more to go abroad and see the place. In those days, no one traveled abroad. None of us have ever been abroad till then. So going to the US for a master's, to me, was an exposure to a completely new culture, get immersed there, understand what's going on. But beyond that, I felt that I needed to be in this country. In those days, our education in IIT was extremely subsidized, virtually free. Our tuition was 12 rupees a month, and the hostel rent was 15 rupees a month. So I did feel that, that one has to do what is needed here rather than make money abroad. And that I could do it. There was no reason why I couldn't do
it. It's clearly not a very common thought among IITians even today, but how many of your IIT peers actually wanted to do something like what you did? As in come back or stay back in India?
As far as I know, no one came back. Of all those that I know personally, about 70% of our class went abroad. And another maybe 10-15% wanted to, but couldn't make it in terms of getting scholarships and stuff like that. In those days, no one ever went without a scholarship, right? Unless everything was paid for, we couldn't go. So a few people didn't go because they didn't want to. 1 or 2 stayed back consciously, went to IIMs and things like that, but didn't actually go to the US and then come back. Those who went to the US stayed on. I don't know of anybody else who actually came back, of all my friends at least.
And how was your peers' response for your return? Was that appreciated?
Not particularly. I think at least for 15 years after that, everybody I met, the first question would be, why did you come back? And then I had to find some answer to it. And I felt embarrassed to say patriotism, but had to find some other kind of answer for it. Of course, the longer it took after I came back, the easier it was because I seemed to have a decent career. So it didn't look like I'd made a lousy mistake. But to start with, who knows what would have happened.
But those were the days also like that, right? People desperately wanted to exit as well, right? I mean, you
Yes, I
just had
mean,
very
we were in the middle of, when I came back, we were in the middle of emergency. There was, the economy wasn't great at all. It was the height of industrial licensing and control. So there were very few good companies that one could think of joining, and salaries were very, very low.
And what was your family's thing? I mean, were they like,
My parents were quite keen that I came back. Well, my father was perceived to be not too well. At least my mother thought that my father could pass away anytime. He had a history of diabetes and 2 heart attacks long before and all that stuff. So she was always sort of insecure about how long he would continue to be working. And I was the eldest, I had 2 younger brothers. So there was always a unwritten sort of pressure that you got to take care of them in case.
so obviously family was supportive of your decision to come back,
Sure.
right?
But to
And
be honest, they were not involved. It's entirely my
oh,
decision.
okay, so okay.
I mean, once I was 16-year-old and in IIT, other than a small amount of money every month that they had to pay, all my decisions were my own. To go to IIT was my decision. What branch to take was my decision, and what to do on a daily basis was also mine. And they supported that. I mean, I was an adult and I had to do what I had to do. Very different from nowadays. Yeah.
Just curious, is that how it was with your children? I mean, were you involved with what they should
Much more,
study? I mean,
much more. Yeah. We
you
were
were.
involved a lot more in their lives, um, which is unfortunate in some ways because they should learn to stand on their own. Uh, but I think society changed in the meanwhile. You are not expected to be financially independent at say 2021 anymore. One is in a position to help. Also, our generation is in a better position to help the children financially. So it's kind of taken for granted that you will for much longer.
Right. And
Education seems to go on much longer.
was
And
there ever a regret in your course of your professional life that you should have probably stayed back in US and would
no,
have done?
never.
Never?
I never regret it. One thing is that I had a wonderful career not in terms of how well you do or materially, but in terms of enjoying the job every day and having great fun and getting a vast amount of experiences that I enjoyed. So having fun all the time was one of the important things that kept me happy. Money certainly wasn't a great, the times when we joined the Tata Administrative Service, our starting salary was 1,250 rupees.
But even that was more of getting into an elite club, right? How did that happen? I mean,
I met someone at when I started looking for a job after I came back from the US. I went to many companies, had a chat with many companies, including Hindustan Lever and others. Initially, just as a casual chat, not a formal interview, to understand what things are like. And during that time, at a party, I met someone who said, have you thought about the Tata Administrative Service? And I said, I've never heard of it. And he said, no, come on Monday morning and to my office, here's my number, and let me introduce you. So he was a a TAS guy about 3-4 years in the system. And so I went off to his office in Bombay House in Bombay. And he introduced me to the guy who ran the TAS, gentleman called Maligamwala. And we had a chat for an hour or so, and he said, "You're exactly the right kind of fellow that we're looking for," and gave me the form and so on. And then, the process started. It's an incredibly, complex process. If there's one thing that I thought the Tata Administrative Service was particularly special at, it was the selection process. By the end of the selection process, all of us knew each other better than anybody in our families would have. You know who are the bullshitters, who have got substance, what kind of characteristics, their characters in detail, their personalities, everything. It's a very detailed process, which nowadays probably most people don't have the time to do. But at that time, there were 3-4 rounds. You got shortlisted. Each round was a half day. And then the final round, there were 12 or 13 people. And it was a 3 full days process.
And obviously, this process keeps changing over a period of time, but
Yes.
you must be familiar with whatever has happened over a
Yes.
period of time. So how would you rate
I was in the Tata Administrative Services for 5 years, a little over 5 years. Things dramatically changed 20 years later, let's say. Today's process is very different from then. And I don't know the details of it, but I know that very large numbers are recruited now comparatively. So it must be very different. And also there's competition in recruitment. So you can't afford to ask people to come for 3 days and so on. People won't come. They've got many more options than used to be the case then. But that was an excellent process in those days, no doubt.
So how would you, you regard that process to be the best in your experience, in your perspective?
By far the best. To get exactly what they wanted. They knew what they wanted, and the process ensured that you could read each individual thoroughly. So then you were in a position to pick what you want. And in those days, the Tata Administrative Services simply said that there are some people who are TAS guys. And if you find that, we take them. If you don't find, we don't take. So it could be nobody taken in a year. It could be 6, 7, 8 taken in a year, but rarely more than 6 or 7.
Right. And later in your career in life, you were the head of the organizations, you ran them. Did you ever try to create this kind of a model there to build what do you call a band of future leaders in the organization? Did you try anything like that?
Well, you see, every organization has some kind of management trainee scheme. So Hindustan Lever, for example, has management trainees, and they are selected. At the time they are selected, each one is supposed to have the potential to be the CEO of Hindustan Lever, what we call Chem-Trend.
Okay. So
without that, they're not selected. So they are all of that type. But it was different from the Tata Administrative Service because the Tatas, as you know, had many companies. Each company had their own management recruitment. And this was like a super special thing, just 5 or 6 people for a whole group of that size. Is not the same. It's not building the leaders for each company. It's too small for that.
right.
It is building some special overall group, leaders. So it's somewhat different. So otherwise, every company, has it. Yes, I created it in my last company also, which didn't have such a system. We started a whole management training scheme and development activities, and 2 years, a whole 2-year program. Of course, it was different because it had to be tailored to the company. It's an international German company that spent a lot of time in Germany doing projects in different companies, different parts of the group and things like that. So we did create something appropriate.
Oh, yes. I'll want to dig more on that in a different next part of the conversation, perhaps. So, what happened after?
Yeah, so I joined the Tata Administrative Service, and I in those days, you had to go to 4 companies for projects, after which you select one of the companies to join permanently. Sorry?
You select it, not the companies.
Yeah, it's like this. So after you go to each company, each of them will then, say that we want this guy or we don't want this guy. So if you're in the fortunate position of having everybody wanting you, then you select.
Oh,
If nobody wants you, then of course you have a different problem. So yeah, so I got to select. I went to what was then called Tata Finlay, which later became Tata Tea and then Tata Consulting.
Why did you choose Tata Finlay? Is there any other connect there?
I met at the time of the interviews itself. I met Mr. Krishna Kumar, who at that time was the CEO. It was a small company, but he was the CEO. He was the first TAS CEO of any company. And the headquarters were basically 3 TAS guys and 1 secretary. So it was a nice kind of place, with the right culture. And he was he told me at that time itself that I want you to join. Whether you get into the TAS or not, I want you to join. And he had a very specific.
And this conversation was even before you were out of the TAS process, is it? TAS process?
Yeah, during the interviews. He said, best of luck to get in. But if you don't get in also, you come here, I'll give you a job. So there was a reason that they wanted me to do a particular job, and he made it sound exciting and so on. So I was happy.
And what was the reason?
Well, there was at that time, it was a small company with 2 divisions. Packet tea was a very small, almost non-existent division. And then there was an instant tea division based in Munnar, which is exporting instant tea. It had just started performing after 10, 15 years of technical problems. And so once it had started, working well, the technology had just been developed and it was making a lot of money at that time. So Tata Finlay was extremely dependent on that plant working well and that process and that business doing well. And there was a concern that there was no succession. There was only one man who knew what was going on. And so he was keen that I should go there and sort of get to know the whole thing and be prepared to take over if necessary.
And how old were you?
I was 23 when I was joining here.
Seriously, what an opportunity, right? For 23-year-old.
Yeah, absolutely.
And language, was that not an issue?
No. Why? In what sense?
You moved to Munnar.
Yeah, Munnar is, well, of course, the management is conducted in English, but
Right.
the workers are mostly Tamil.
Oh, is it?
Those in Kerala, but they're mostly Tamil speaking. All the plantation workers, as you know, are Tamil speaking. In South India, whether Kerala or the tea plantations are all Tamil workers. Right? So you can speak Tamil, and for other things, government and all that, Malayalam. So I could manage.
Oh, you could manage, is it? Okay. And what were the things that were giving you those daily highs that you ended up in Munnar instead of somewhere in US? So.
Yeah. So from a work point of view, there were 2 things that were exciting, or 3 things. One was tremendous delegation and authority. I was the number 2 of that plant. And very quickly, my boss was sort of willing to give me a lot of freedom and stuff. So I was doing everything. Second is that we did a lot of research between us. The 2 of us together did a lot of process modification and stuff, which was exciting. 2 months after I joined, there was a strike by a Marxist union. So for 2 months, there was a the place was locked down, and I was put in charge of handling it. So it was a huge learning experience for me about how the labor system works. And of course, I can still recite without repeating myself all the Marxist slogans that they kept shouting, and they would gherav me and all that stuff. But and then we went, the process of conciliation goes through the government mechanism. It failed at every level. And finally, we were at the labor minister's office, who happened to be a gentleman called Oommen Chandy, who was recently passed away, who was the chief minister last. But at that time, he was a young labor minister, around 30 years old. He must have been around 30 then. In his office, the meeting started at 10 or 11 in the morning and went on till 2 in the morning. And by 2 in the morning, all the union guys were sleeping on the floor. And only we were awake, the two management guys. So we suggested to him that he signs an order referring the matter to an industrial tribunal and then forcing people back to work. And thereafter, I spent 2 years, going to the industrial tribunal, working with the lawyers. So I learned a lot on labor law and how to handle all this. And I'm very happy that at the end of it, there was no strike, again, for decades, though I was not there. And all the leaders of these groups were very pally with me after that. They used to even send me Christmas cards for years after I left Munnar. Now, so what I'm trying to say is that we were not trying to push down, unfair things. We wanted it to be fair and settled it fair quickly. So we influenced our arguments at the industrial tribunal were not to reduce the salaries, but only to agree a certain system that would make long-term sense, rather than an arbitrary bit of salary here or there. So it worked well, and I learned a lot about this whole thing.
But was it not a challenge, as in you're 23 and probably 24 in the process, and perhaps the youngest among everybody else there, and with so much of two things, right? One is that the sense of authority and power that you wielded. How did you cope with that? Because I think we are human, right? And two, how did they connect with you to see a young man wielding so much power? So how did they see that?
I think, two answers to that. One is that in the plantations which surrounded us, we were not a plantation, but we were living amongst plantations. In the plantations, every estate has got a manager and an assistant manager. The assistant manager typically joins at the age of 20 or 21. So it was not unusual for people to see someone with power at that age. Of course, an assistant manager had much less independent authority compared to what I was doing. But it was okay. I don't think anybody saw that as an issue. And I myself, I would say, mentally didn't think of myself as a very young man. I was fairly mature and had already, dealt with life in quite, I went off to the US by myself with $10 in my pocket. I had to find my own way, establish myself there and do whatever was necessary, and travel and do everything on my own. Other than one ticket from Bombay to New York, my parents had to spend no money. I could not. The foreign exchange rules did not allow it.
Right. And
I didn't think of myself as a young fellow in deep waters or anything like that. I was quite prepared for it. Mentally thought of myself as quite okay, mature enough to handle it.
right. But still, your post-graduation or MS in chemical engineering, and then having to deal with compliance issues and strike, perhaps the first strike you have actually seen, or you?
Yeah, obviously that had actually handled. I knew about strikes, but there was no personal experience of it.
Was there must have been people trying to threaten you,
Well, they did gherav me while going to work, etc. But I never felt threatened because I knew all these chaps and they were essentially simple fellows. So I was not bothered. Meaning they were instigated by some outside union leader, but I always thought that yes, they're okay guys as individuals, and they will surely, be friends again. And they were.
Yeah, but I guess that does demonstrate a huge sense of maturity, right? For somebody who's seeing it for
There
the
was
first
the
time to.
slogans that they shouted included, that we will see blood flowing and all this stuff. The Malayalam slogans, and these are all the standard,
Oh,
Marxist
is it?
slogans.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
talking about the red flag. The flag is red because it's been dipped in blood, and
Okay.
it'll be your blood and all that.
So that's what was the slogan? I mean,
Yeah.
the show. Okay. And your family was aware of these situations that you were in? No? You
Not
never
in
shared?
detail. Who's going to tell them? Not in detail, but yeah, broadly.
All right.
But
And
I honestly never felt any threat.
right. And you
And then
spent
on the other side, life in Munnar was an incredible joy. It's so beautiful. Weekends were, climbing mountains and a lot of young people having fun together, etc. So there was both sides. It was in some ways, like a college. Weekends
oh,
was
you had a circle of friends there as well.
yeah, all the plantation guys. There were many people of my age and youngsters having fun together.
Okay.
And the club and a lot of games and all that. We played a lot of cricket, squash every day, etc., etc.
But it's a slow life compared to a city life, right? I mean,
Slow and fast, I don't know how to define, but let's say, um, you go into the club. First of all, I was busy, right? So working 10, 12 hours on the weekdays. But nevertheless, I went to the club every evening. We played squash, came back. And on 2 nights of the week, there's a movie and there's something happening in the club. And, Saturday will be a late night. And then we'll go off to somebody else's house, climb a mountain, eat, drink,
so you
enjoy
had a
yourself.
very active social life as well.
Very active social life and active games. And then, for 3 or 4 months of the year, there are meets between clubs. So Munnar Club will play Cochin Club or Vandiperiyar or Anamalays or whatever. And you go there for 3 days. You're hosted by different people. You stay with different people there. And over 3 days, you play tennis, squash, cricket, etc. Cricket and golf. All that will
It's
be fun. You get to
it's
see a lot
so
of
long
places.
since it happened, right? I
Lots of
think
wildlife.
no, it's literally more than 40 years, and you 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 have such a distinct memory of each of these things. It must be your favorite times, perhaps, or was that?
And I have distinct memories of many, many things in life, including, school days much
Oh,
earlier. And so I don't, no reason to, I mean, every detail I may not remember, but a lot of stuff I remember
yeah, but
before and
even
after. But it
even
was good
slow.
fun. I'm in touch with many of the people from there.
Oh, even now?
Yeah.
Okay. And where did this journey take you further
So
from
then,
Munnar?
after 3 years there, I was transferred to Calcutta. The headquarters of the company was in Calcutta. Um, so meanwhile, the company had got merged with the plantations and become the company that was more known to everybody by then, uh, primarily based on plantations. It had become a 40% foreign-owned company. So this merger happened because of FERA, Foreign Exchange Regulation Act 76, which required all the plantations to dilute. They were till then 100% foreign-owned plantations. They had to dilute the shareholding, etc. So they merged the plantations there were plantations in Munnar and many other places were owned by the Finlays group, who were a partner of Tata's in the Tata Finlay company. which
Right.
I had joined. So the small Tata Finlay company merged with the whole plantations and also issued shares to the public, and it became a larger company called Tata Finlay, in which 40% was Finlays, and Tata's was some 13-14%. So it was a Finlay, and the rest was public. So anyway, and tea being a commodity, of course, it goes up and down. So after the initial shareholding was issued, the first year was very profitable. All the shareholders were very thrilled. Tatas have come into the tea industry and we are making a lot of money. But a year later, tea prices were down, and the opposite was true. So then suddenly there was a lot of hue and cry at the AGM that why are you in commodities and you need to diversify and all that stuff. So the response to that was to say, okay, we are putting a young TAS smart guy in charge of diversification. So I was sent off to the head office in Calcutta in charge of new projects and diversification.
So what
It was a bit of a joke.
Okay.
So they had no cash, no intention at that stage to diversify. There was no money. They didn't really have a clear plan on anything. So that was not going to happen. And therefore, I asked for something else to do. And then, I got some insurance claim settling agencies that they had. I was put in charge of that. I learned that business, not very exciting, but that went along. So a year and a half after I'd been there, it was clear that things were not going very well for Tata Finlay at the time. And therefore, I thought I should leave.
You could not have moved into any other Tata company because you are
I could theoretically. I could. But it doesn't look good, or it's not good for your career. It was perceived to be not good for you that you are asking for a move. It's another matter if some company says, I want this guy and he's pulled out, rather than you go sort of, begging for a job. So I didn't want to do that. And anyway, by then, it was clear, to be honest, by then everybody from my batch in the TAS had already left. I was the only one left. So the TAS was not in a good shape. The whole Tata group was not doing well, did not have a strong center. Companies were all getting a bit fissiparous. There was no perceived strength of being part of the group. The whole culture was going downhill. J.R.D. Tata, who was the head, was very old and not really playing a strong role. So things were not looking good for the whole TAS itself. And so I applied and then I thought, okay, which company is it worth joining? And I said, Hindustan Lever is the one that sounds good. And so I applied there and I went there.
So you applied to one company?
Yeah.
Okay.
I applied to Hindustan Lever and joined there. After
you joined the tea business itself?
No connection. First of all, Hindustan Lever had no tea business then.
At that time, they didn't have?
No.
A Brook Bond Lever?
No, Brook Bond was an independent company.
Oh,
Lipton was an independent company.
Lipton. Oh, okay.
Lipton had been acquired.
But it was under the same group, or they acquired it later on?
Brook Bond was acquired later. Lipton had already been acquired internationally, but in India was still independent.
It was still.
So Hindustan Lever had sent one or two people to sort of run it, but for all practical purposes, it was still independent.
It was a separate entity. Okay.
And Brook Bond, of course, was still completely independent. It got acquired in 84 only. And this was 81 when I joined Hindustan.
Okay.
So anyway, I didn't see myself as a tea person. I had done instant tea, which is not tea. I mean, it's more of a process.
So what was the function that you got into? What was the...
Yeah, so they were actually a little bit... they selected me, but they were unclear where to put me. Let me put it that way. Because I didn't fit. I had been doing businesses. I showed great interest in running businesses. But I had not been doing a functional job, right? So it was not easy to just say, this guy is a marketing guy or he's a technical, either production guy or as an engineering guy or finance guy. Therefore, it was not easy to slot me in. Normally, a person who was recruited at that stage would go into marketing, sales and marketing, or go into a functional stream. Therefore, I was put in animal feeds, where the structure is one where the lowest level manager runs the whole business. The whole all India business is split into regional, local businesses. And every local guy runs a full business. He's got a factory, he's got a sales team, he procures raw material, he does everything, right? Which fitted me to a T. I loved it. So I did a few months of training, and then I was in Ahmedabad. So I was running the animal feeds business based in Ahmedabad, and covering Rajasthan, Gujarat, and parts of Madhya Pradesh. So I had a factory next door to the first and only Reliance factory in those days, making fabric. Next to it.
So here this was more of a trading business?
No.
You would also...
We had a factory there, we bought raw material, we manufactured it, and we sold it to cattle farmers, to poultry farmers, and so on.
So in this role, unlike previously where you were responsible for the factory, here you also had the business responsibility added on to the factory.
Correct.
And
or rather, the Muna role is what you're talking about. But after that, I was 2 years in Calcutta, where I was doing, I was running an insurance business and sort of fiddling around trying to convince the company to do some diversification, which was not successful.
All right. And
yeah, so this was a complete business, and it was a great business. It was the most profitable business in Hindustan Lever consistently. Okay. And because the margins and costs had to be held low, you had to learn to really live, cheap. So I used to travel 15 to 20 days a month and essentially travel overnight so that you don't have hotel costs. Travel by train every night, work the whole day, take another train next night, work the whole day, take another train or bus overnight, etc. I've even traveled in a vegetable truck from Udaipur to Ahmedabad. When I really got to appreciate how difficult it is to drive that thing. Because I was sitting up with the Ustad, the driver is called the Ustad, right? I mean, what looked in a car, you wouldn't even notice a slight uphill. This guy starts struggling. He's got to move 3 gears down much before the slope starts. Otherwise, he'll get stuck. So really hard. And then there'll be a breakdown. There's something will happen on the road. Middle of the night, there was a jam in the road. He didn't bother. He just got out, took his chadar, laid under the truck, went to sleep. And there's a Chotu, the guy who cleans and all. Chotu has to go and see what's going on and then come and wake him up in time when the jam is cleared. He starts driving again. And he dropped me right outside the factory at 7 in the morning.
And it was safer to do all this night travel around those days?
Isn't it safe now? I think it's perfectly safe.
Right. This was which region you said? Gujarat?
Gujarat, Rajasthan, and parts of Madhya Pradesh.
But those were the days where you had Madhya Pradesh, UP, and even this border of Gujarat, Rajasthan was where the dacoits, right? The Chambal.
Yeah, we were not going to the Chambal.
I mean,
so
what I remember is these were the escape routes for them, right? Gujarat, Rajasthan, because
but I think it's all overstated. Yeah? Normal people
are
traveling all the time. There's nothing. There are always gundas in business. So I had a contract out on my life in Barmer district. So at one point, I was told that if you enter Barmer district, you will get killed.
And why would somebody do something like that?
One of the opportunities I found was the camels in BSF, to sell feed for the camels in BSF. So, but unfortunately, we didn't have a camel feed. We knew nothing about camels. So I found out that there's a professor of specialist in camel nutrition, camel digestion, and all that in Bikaner University. Then I went, I got hold of him, and I couldn't get to meet the man. So I found his house. I went to the house, talked nicely to his wife and daughter. By the time this guy came back from work, he found me deeply entrenched in his house. So he had no option but to talk to me. So a couple of hours, I got some basic principles from him, then created a camel feed. And then started going to all these, BSF commandants, different commandants. With great effort, I, was able to get into one battalion in Jaisalmer. And then we organized a camel race between the camels of this battalion and other battalions. And of course, we had to make sure that these camels would win, so to show that our feed is much better. And it turned out that the camels were being fed. The camels were supposed to be fed according to a manual published in 1930 something as to what is the daily ration of a camel supposed to be. And that was, 2 kilos of chana, 1 kilo of so-and-so dal, and stuff like that. So according to that, they were procuring. But the suppliers were in cahoots with the quartermasters. And instead of giving chana, they would give only the chilka of the chana, which is the, the outside.
Yeah.
So these, and making money on that. And that's been going on since pre-independence. So the same suppliers have been making money. So there were two battalions in Barmet, 2 battalions in Jaisalmer. There were suppliers who have been making money for 30 years. So when they got displaced, they were not very happy.
And first of all, you saw the camels, you saw there is an opportunity, you just went after the professor, tried to understand what could be the right nutritious product that you could build. You just built a product and you just took it to the market. I mean, this is like how an entrepreneur does. But was that part of your mandate?
Totally entrepreneurial.
But was that part of your mandate? What you need to be doing, or it's like
yes,
you
yes.
could
If
just
at least the better managers in animal feed should do that. You have all the freedom to do it. If you're more bureaucratic, you'll wait for instruction. And
I mean, you didn't have to say that this is what you will do. You plan nothing. You could just go do.
Yeah, I mentioned it briefly to someone, but they're only interested to see the success. Of course, they have to trust that you will not produce some rubbish, right? So you need to have principles of nutrition and all that. You're not going to supply something that will kill a camel, then you're in trouble.
So this is where your academic background kind of.
Yeah, and I took the trouble to learn animal nutrition properly. I should talk to the veterinarian. We had, veterinarians and animal nutrition specialists available. So discuss with them and come up with.
And no specific licensing permits or anything if you're selling feed?
No. Overall, there's some overall license, but there was nothing. It was a small scale activity.
Okay.
There was no regulation on product inspections and stuff like that.
Oh, is it? I hope they must be in place today, right? Because
I doubt it.
Oh, even today?
Every farmer, feeding 2 cows, you can't tell him what he's supposed to feed and not feed.
No, but if somebody's selling it,
depends. What is all small companies selling it? Now the biggest is the whole Amul kind of cooperatives for cattle feed. And to be honest, their feed is nothing great. It's pretty bad.
Oh, Amul is also into cattle feed? I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's part of the whole, it's the cooperative system supplies feed and all the inputs to the farmer and takes the milk.
Ah, okay. And there is no regulation on what you feed to the animals or what health, what quality, what nutrition, nothing. Wow. Okay. And while all this was on, you were single? Otherwise, I guess you wouldn't have possible.
I was married, I had a child also.
And you would do this 20 days of travel?
Oh, I've done that for 40 years of my life. 15 to 20 days travel.
And where was your family based?
In Ahmedabad. We were living in Ahmedabad at that time.
And you would do all this night travel and
Yeah,
wow.
we had great fun. I mean, we had a local taxi that we used a lot for the local travel, meaning in and around up to Baroda and places like that. All characters, you know. This guy has been the official driver for my predecessors and so on. So he knows all the poultry farmers. So you miss somebody, you'll say, hey, you've not visited that customer and all that. He'll tell you. A guy called Abdul Bhai, sweet guy.
So
Once in 4 or 5 months, he'll call me and my wife and daughter to his house for dinner. He'll come and pick us up, but now no charge, right? And for that, he has to get a bottle of liquor from Bombay because Gujarat was dry, very difficult to get. It'll take him 2 months of planning to get it, you know, through some taxi driver and all to deliver, no, through some truck drivers. Bring one bottle. Once he got the bottle, then he'll invite us. Very sweet guys. He had 2 wives. Then he'll say,
wow.
साहब एक में जो मजा है ना 2 में नहीं है. So I said, okay, then why did you marry twice? Then he'll say, एक love के लिए, एक duty के लिए. एक बिरयानी में बढ़िया है, एक कबाब में बढ़िया है. So
Sounds
lots
like
of
some
characters like
film
this. And
dialogue.
all the travel is to the villages. So it was great fun, you know. You learn about the real India, village to village, farmers you're meeting. I used to carry projectors, 16 projectors with movies. Show a movie in each village at night. 7 o'clock you reach, show a movie on the wall of somebody's house. All the villagers collect. And then at the middle, you know, interval or something like that, give them a speech about our field. And then
Ah,
continue.
but tell me something. Did you have the rights to do that, showcase a movie? There was always a permission part of it, right? Or people just do that in the rural area?
Yeah, they do it anyway, but we got it from some distributor of movies.
Okay. And what was it? Tapes?
Well,
Those days?
Bollywood movies. No,
Yeah,
not
but
tapes. Those days there were no tapes. Reels. You had
oh,
to carry a projector.
so
16
wow.
reels. So you go village to village doing this 2 shows in the evening. I mean, I used to
And
go once every alternate month to Kutch. And touring Kutch was a 4-day tour, staying in different villages. Mundra, what is now Adani's huge port, Mundra, was a little village. Stay in a lodge, in the tourist lodge. I mean, the government rest house, dark bungalow kind of thing. One day in Mundra, one day in Mandvi, one day in Nakhatrana, then to Bhuj. I should take overnight train from Ahmedabad to Gandhidham, then travel 4 days over there with my salesman and distributor in a taxi there. End up in Bhuj, catch an overnight bus back to Ahmedabad. So each area was like that. Every Saturday was Kheda district. Almost everything I've learned in my life on business was learned from the distributor of Kheda district at that time. A guy called Chandrakant Bhai Soma Bhai Patel. He was not more than 6, 7 years older than me. I was like, whatever, 28 at that time. And he would have been 34, 35. Tremendously good businessman. He was the largest distributor of animal feeds we had in the country, living in a small village. And his attitude to business was just incredible. I mean, when I arrived and, you know, first time I met him, I was like really worried because before my coming there, we had killed all the birds in that area. You know, we didn't supply feed, our factory was closed, all sorts of problems were there. So all the birds died because they didn't have feed. And this guy's outstandings were 40 lakhs, all lost. In 1981, 40 lakhs was a big amount to me.
oh, huge.
And so everybody was scared of him, right? There was a threat that he would take all the farmers to Bombay to the head office to sort of have a big demonstration against Hindustan Lever. People were shit scared. Then I went off to Ahmedabad under these circumstances. I went to meet him. First thing he's saying, suicide. Why? He didn't even know Hindi, only Gujarati. Why are you looking so worried? I said, I've
And
come here.
you could
I
manage
heard,
Gujarati as well?
yeah, I have to manage. I learned
How
it.
many languages do you speak?
I don't say I speak it, I can learn. Understand it, I could at that time. And before that, Bengali a little bit and so on. So I manage.
So Hindi, Marathi, Tamil,
Marathi,
Malayalam.
very little. Yeah, but IIT, yeah, you can manage a bit. You have to learn all these things, when you travel around. So anyway, the guy says, why are you worried? I am here. We will set everything right. After losing 40 lakhs, this is what he's telling me. You don't be worried, okay? What is your annual target? Okay, I'll make sure you get to your annual target.
Why would
He's
he
telling
do
me to
that?
take care of my career.
Why would he do that?
He's just that kind of guy.
Wow.
Incredible guy. That guy lives in America now, right? He's been settled in Pennsylvania. He calls me twice a year at least. I visited him a year ago, and he still speaks only Gujarati.
Wow. And you're
But
still
his
in touch.
ability to do business was take risk and all that was fantastic, absolute. And he could calculate everything in his mind, costs and profits and all that in no time. So you learn a lot from all these characters, different characters.
Right. And what was your
So
biggest
I was
learning
there
from
two
him?
years. Then I got moved to Bombay, and I was put in charge of another, at the time, sick business, which was seafood exports, which was an extremely dangerous kind of, for a big company, a dangerous business. Everything is handled in cash, and they were all worried about fraud and what's going on. Again, it was badly run. There were a lot of gundas. So we had a plant in Puri, and the whole area was absolutely, everybody in the business was a gunda. So we had been cheated by our partners, local guys. The competitors were also gundas. So the first day I flew to Bhubaneswar. From the airport only, I was kidnapped by the competitors, locked in one room for the whole day. Evening, they let me out saying, okay, it's just a
When you say
warning.
competitor, the local competitor,
Yeah,
or
local
they were
guys
large
who
companies,
also seafood exporters. All the seafood exporters are small local guys everywhere.
and they
And
knew
there
you're
was a lot of
coming, so
them.
they.
Yeah. And then later I found out that my predecessors were so scared they actually never went to Puri. They used to come to the airport in Bhubaneswar, meet the local managers, ask them to come there, meet them, and then walk off and then
From the
fly
airport
off back.
itself.
Exactly. Because of all this gundagi stuff. Then later on, anyway, there are so many stories. This will
No,
go on
how
and
long
on.
did they hold you captive? How did you get away from
Few
that?
hours, few hours. Then they let me out, and they
What was
became
that?
very good friends.
They
Just a
wanted.
threat to say that you guys, don't allow us because you have so much money, we can't compete. You must let us also live and blah blah blah, that kind of thing. All became good friends of mine and became big businessmen later.
And it's true, they carry guns, some local guns in Puri.
Some people do. The other interesting thing there is that the pandas of the Jagannath temple
Hmm.
are the local gundas. They're
Oh,
not
that's
gundas
true,
in the
is it?
sense, they're the tough guys. Okay. They spend the whole panda community are bodybuilders. A few of them only have official jobs in the temple. All the others live around the temple and do bodybuilding. That's their official thing. They're from childhood, they do bodybuilding. So they're all really the tough guys. And they are available for hire for anybody. You need to get some property, somebody evacuated, whatever it is, you send these fellows as the tough guys. And so we appointed the head of these pandas, of the bodybuilding pandas, as our partner. So he was called Panda Babu. He was a big guy. And he became a very good friend of mine. So he will come like this. I mean, his walking is like this because his muscles of his thighs are such that they can't touch. They're touching. So they have to walk with his legs spread apart and he'll come. Namaskar, Shoaib. Tough guys, then. Hard times. because you had to deal with all these fishermen and suppliers who are all gundas. So the guy who had cheated Hindustan Lever before that was a well-known guy there, also like this. He put up the first fancy hotel, five-star hotel in Puri. Okay. And before it was opened, he gave me a call and said, I want you to be the first person to visit because after all, it's made with your money, blatantly.
He actually told you that.
So I go visiting and I knew this guy will do some hera-feri. So I said, where are all your cameras hidden? You know, the bedrooms will have hidden cameras. He'll take videos and stuff. He invites, you know, ministers or senior people
Wow.
and ensures that they are caught in flagrant positions, and then that's good for him. So then
Wow.
he got upset with all that and he put out a contract again for me, right? Second time, contract on my head. So I went to Puri. I was told, don't go to Puri, there's a contract on your head. I went there, I told Pandava Bhusi, this guy's name was Ladu Patra. Ladu Babu has put out a contract on my life. Pandava Babu says, sir, wait here. I will go and bring his leg just now. One tang, uska ek tang tod ke leke aata hu. And he would have done it literally.
Oh boy.
These are the kind of guys. And his partner, another interesting thing. The only guy I've ever met whose first name is Duryodhan. His name was Duryodhan Sahu. He's actually
Wow.
named Duryodhan. So that's another set of interesting things. We had a plant in Cochin, we had a plant in Kanyakumari, we did different things. I mean, a lot of fun.
Yeah, sure.
And then
And
we started aquaculture. We were the first in the country to start aquaculture, prawn aquaculture. And another interesting tidbit, we had a small farm in a place called Sandesh Khali, which you might be reading about now. Have you read the news the last 3-4 weeks? A huge flare up in a place called Sandesh Khali, where the whole place is run by gundas of the TMC and they've been put in prison and so on. That is where we had
that's the place. Okay.
farm. There was no power, there was no electricity anywhere around there, no telephone connection. I used to go and stay there in the middle. It's just near the border. Everybody there is illegal immigrants from Bangladesh. I used to go there every month.
Even those days, is it?
Those days it was really wild. Now it's a lot more population, you know. There was no power within 100 kilometers almost.
Or it was a communist government, CPI government then.
Yeah, but doesn't, no, CPM, but government is irrelevant. It's in the middle of the Sundarbans.
And it's difficult to man the fence also, borders also.
Yeah. So every night when you sleep there, we had built a hut and all there. You will hear all around our prawn farms. And all night you will hear shots going off. Every guy is sitting in, you know, with a gun. And you'll hear splashing, but people come and put their hands into the pond and pick up prawns. When you hear the splash, they just fire. It was the
Wow.
Wild West, Wild East.
Okay. And how did that business take off, or was it a bad timing?
Unfortunately, it didn't. The aquaculture part finally didn't take off. We chose not to kill it. But initially, I mean, for a while, Unilever had plans to be the largest prawn aquaculture producer in the world. They were already very large salmon producers. They had started salmon farming in Scotland. They're very large in Scotland and in Chile. And prawns, we had experimental sites in Sandesh Khali. We had a hatchery outside Madras. We had another farm in Maharashtra. We had another site, a big site in Sri Lanka. I was also involved with that. And then we started one in Malaysia. I was involved with that. So we wanted to become very big, but at some point they decided not to go forward. So because we were the early ones in all this, I was also helping the government, the Department of Biotechnology. So any proposals for people starting farms, aquaculture farms, would go to the Department of Biotechnology. They would send it to me to vet and send it back.
Wow. So started with tea, and then bit of insurance claims, and then animal feed,
And seafood
then
exports, we did
seafood.
very well. I did a lot of work in Japan. My primary markets were Japan, but we also sold elsewhere. I got, very good friends, customers who became friends.
And that's why
Um,
you were internally called as Mr. Japan also, right?
yeah. And then the company decided that we needed a bigger window into Japan as a company, not for seafood. Because if you remember in the 80s, Japan was considered the leading technology
Mm.
source for everything, and all Japanese companies were doing the best, and it was seen that Japan is going to take over the world kind of thing. So Hindustan Lever wanted a window into new technologies and other things. So it was decided that we should set up an office in Japan, Hindustan Lever, and I would go there and run that. But by the time I organized and looked at the costs, it was horrendous. This was the days, late 80s, when Tokyo was by far the most expensive place in the world. That finally they said, no, you achieve the same objective sitting in Bombay. So I'd appointed someone part-time, and we started a Japan office. All that, it went well. We started, amongst many things, we started producing cuttlefish for sashimi in Japan, raw eating, which has to have the highest quality. Right? To eat raw, it has to be very low in bacteria. And it was also the largest size cuttlefish in the world. So it was the highest priced cuttlefish in the world came from Kanyakumari, from our plant. And we had a Japanese expert sitting there 4 months of the year, supervising every day. And you can't imagine the expertise they have. He's standing in the plant, trucks are bringing cuttlefish from different fishing villages. So as it comes, he's got a knife in his hand. He'll cut a piece and he'll chew it. He'll ask the driver, from which village? That guy says, Kadiyapatnam. He takes one more piece. Viju, this is not Kadiyapatnam. This Muttam cuttlefish, this Muttam.
Wow.
From the taste, he said, this is not from Kadiyapatnam, it's from Muttam. Muttam is 5 kilometers from Kadiyapatnam. And later on, it turns out he's right. The driver had confused where he picked it up. So he could make out from the type of soil under the sea and the rockiness and so on, what the taste will be. That much expertise.
How do you manage to capture that as an organization? How do you, those days, there was not much of
So he
tech
wrote
also, right?
a 20-page manual in Japanese by hand. Okay, the whole process to be followed, how much time, blah, 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 which we translated, handwritten, and it was kept there, number one. Number two, he physically stood there. He would not allow a single thing to happen without his presence. And in order to be fresh, the processing had to happen within 4 hours of it being brought to the shore.
Okay.
So these were only cuttlefish that were caught by catamarans. It means, guys, the catamarans, there are 2-3 logs of wood. There's no place to sit. 2 guys are standing. They catch the cuttlefish by pole and line fishing. That means one fish at a time. And after you catch it, it's put into a net and hung at the side of the boat. So it remains live in the water.
In the water.
So when they come back in the evening, they're still live. Right? And we pick it up. Trucks leave ice over there in the afternoon. These come, they go onto the ice, and they're picked up and brought to the plant by 7 o'clock in the evening. Anything arrives after 7:30, rejected. And then the processing is done immediately. By 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock, it has to be finished. And the guy stands there till midnight. Anything that's later than that is rejected. Then we take the whole thing. The season is only 2-3 months long. Then the whole thing goes to Japan, and he physically sells it. He goes to the most expensive restaurants and says, here's a sample. I personally supervised every step of it. That gives those guys total confidence. I have gone with them like the selling.
Wow.
So obviously it's not a scalable, it's not for thousands of tons, it's for the real, top restaurants.
But does it make sense for a company like Unilever to be doing these kind of niche businesses?
Arguable. You have to have a combination. Let me put it the other way. We had to do a certain amount of exports. It was one of the obligations we had under FERA in order to meet our 51% shareholding requirement. Right? All the other companies, Coca-Cola, IBM, and all left the country. We refused to leave the country, and we refused to dilute to 40%.
So you had to show more exports.
So there were many conditions. One of the conditions was that we would export 10% of our annual sale. Every year, the export would be at least 10%. And it had to be manufactured exports. You can't simply trade something and achieve it, right? So we had to do many things to make that up. And, seafood was one of those. Now, within seafood, you can do large volumes of bulk commodity shrimp. But then you lose money like now, right? Because there's no margins there. So only by doing value-added niche businesses can you make some money. So you have to do multiple small businesses to make it up.
Wow. Okay. So what
Also an
makes
ego trip, let's say.
ego trip?
Yeah, to say that we could sell the highest priced cuttlefish in Japan to people who are most concerned about
So
quality, and
perhaps
it comes
the
from
most
India, who would
expensive
believe it?
ship anywhere in the world then.
Right. Now, then you can say that to other people and sell other things.
All right.
Then I moved on. I was put in charge of the garment business. We were doing exports of men's shirts.
And
Factories all over the country.
You moved to which location then?
No, I was in Bombay. I was running the garments business along with the seafood business.
Oh, okay.
We did a lot of, we organized formal training. We went to England for 3 weeks of training on how to make a good shirt and what is fashion. And wonderful course organized just for us. 7, 8 of us had gone. We appointed McKinsey. In those days, there were no strategy consultants in India. For the first time, anybody, so we went to the US, made presentations led by Mr. Gopalakrishnan, primarily, who was heading the export division at that time.
Okay.
Presentations were made to McKinsey, Booz Allen Hamilton, Arthur D. Little, John Naisbitt, etc. in the US. And they then each came for a week. They sent a team for a week, one after the other, and bid for doing this project. And we finally appointed McKinsey. That was the first project that any of these consultants did in India. Out of the New York office, it was done. I was heading it from Hindustan Lever side, 6-month project. And part of that time, I sat in the New York office of McKinsey, and then we traveled around. Anyway,
as much as
based on that, they decided to set up office in India.
No, but as nice as it sounds to have brought them and all that, at no point of time did you feel that this is insulting? I know my market, my products. You have moved from different products, different categories, different segments. What is it that somebody in a different continent will come and teach you how to do your business?
There are 2 answers to that. One is that, remember, today everybody is used to dealing with McKinsey and
correct. No, but at that point of time,
they're here in such large numbers. In those days, they were only big names in our minds. We had never seen them. Nobody exists in India. So to have them work with us itself is like a big thing. Who knows what they will give us, right? The first project anybody has done in India. The second thing is that all of us were used to operating businesses. We have not done too much of strategy thinking. We didn't have to develop strategy. Most large companies have been doing a business for 40 years, right? So, or 50 years or whatever it is. They're not changing their strategy every 3-4 years. So strategic thinking, we felt, may not be our strength. Whereas they are only doing strategy every 6 months with a different company. So even
Mm.
a 35-year-old guy in McKinsey would have already done 20 projects, developing strategy for all sorts of companies and all sorts of industries. So that is the strength that they should bring to. That was our thinking.
And
And for us and for the costs at that time, it was outrageously expensive. So we also worked simultaneously and got the World Bank to fund 50% of it on the argument that it'll help India's exports.
wow, is such a thing still doable?
I doubt it.
And also, Mr. R. Gopal Krishnan, he himself was regarded, or at least today, he is regarded as a management guru, right? How did he convince himself to go and do something like this, or was it something told to him by his bosses that go and get somebody
No,
to
no,
do
no.
this?
It was entirely his initiative. The thinking was exactly this, that we don't have enough experience with strategy development, right? And exports in particular, we were doing all these different businesses. We're doing seafood, we're doing garments, we're doing carpets, we're exporting basmati rice. We're doing so many things trying to make the required exports, right? And therefore, it's useful at least once in a while, after 20 years of doing all this stuff, to have a check by somebody else from outside.
Oh, okay.
Is there a different way to look at things? Are we doing the right way? Should we focus on only 2 or 3 businesses rather than so many businesses? I mean, you could look at it
Right.
in different ways, but that was the origin of looking to McKinsey.
So, how was that experience for you personally?
Well, it was very interesting. I mean, I got to know McKinsey and how they work and how they train their people, and all that was very interesting. Very, very interesting. The quality of their way of thinking at that time, even their presentations were unique. There was no PowerPoint and also, they had their own software, which, brought out very nicely presentations.
Did it ever occur to you that if you were to stay back in US, perhaps you would have been with McKinsey and come back with them in this situation?
It
No,
didn't occur to me, and I mean,
it
it's
didn't.
kind of irrelevant. By that time, I've been working for 14, 15 years, 14, 15 years. It's, who's going to think back like that? Those are all
Right,
old days, but
right. And it is in these times is when that Indian economy opened up also, right? Just around that time, 90.
shortly after that, yeah, the McKinsey project was in second half of 90 and early 91. And it's in 91 that all this stuff happened. The effects of that, of course. The other interesting thing at that time, so we did our export division under Hindustan Lever wrote for the government a part of the export section of the 5-year plan.
Okay.
So we did a lot of work with the government in those days. It was very interesting. So after this liberalization took place, Mr. Chidambaram, who was the commerce minister, was going around meeting different large companies and industry associations, looking for ideas on what to do, what are the problems, how to open up. And he spent, I think, a whole day with us, with Hindustan. And we
Well,
had from the chairman to 3, 4 directors and a couple of us making presentations the whole day, simply advising them on what could be done better.
that must have been a super high at that time.
Yeah, but I'm saying like this, there were many things that our interaction with the government was very strong in trying, purely in helping, giving them advice, sometimes unsought for advice, but we would keep on trying, we would walk around Delhi in many ways trying to push our ideas. And many times they like that. I mean, many individuals sought inputs.
And
So
what
when
were
we
the
saw, Hindustan Lever saw all this as part of our job, not just to run a business. as the largest, most professional company in the country, we had a national obligation. And also individuals. The next section, we'll talk about developing people. So doing things outside of your pure job was also part of your job, to develop you and to develop things.
And what kind of preparations you as a organization and a senior management person had to prepare at those times, when India's economy was opening up? Uh, so what was,
My
I
point
mean,
of
of
view,
course, you
the
were,
economy opening up or not didn't make too much difference to us.
oh, is it?
I mean, what we were doing, I mean, directly nothing changed for us, right? None of the restrictions we had on exports, etc., changed. Licensing, okay, but we are not dealing with licensing on a daily basis. Otherwise, we were doing all the preparations anyway. I mean, internal presentations are the toughest things. Preparing for a presentation. Again, remember, no PPTs, right? So presentation means either writing these big charts and carrying it on a wooden easel,
Right,
or
right.
these transparencies which are
Transparencies you had to,
now we used to do. So, for example, if I have to make a presentation to the board of Hindustan Lever, typically Gopal and I mean, Gopal would say, on this date we'll have to do a presentation. That'll be 1.5 months in advance. Okay. Then he'll say 3 days from now, show me the presentation. From that time, so in 3 days, you'll put together the charts. Then he will go through it chart by chart. Is this a tell chart or a sell chart? What is the takeaway from this chart? What is the headline? What is the bottom line message? Chart by chart, we would analyze it, change it, go back, redo it in 3 days, come back. Like this 5 times, it will, 5 iterations only with Gopal. Then we talk about the actual presentation once the wording is done. In the presentation, he would suggest, changes, improvements, fidgeting of hands, doing this, that, don't do this, don't do that. Once he is happy, then he will call 1 or 2 of the other board members. Let's say MK Sharma, who was a legal head and was till recently ICICI Bank chairman and so on. So MK, why don't you give your inputs? Then I'll do the presentation to him. Then maybe the head of the CFO director will be called. Each of them will give their inputs. But more important than that is the concept of pre-selling the presentation. When 2-3 guys have gone, you have done it with 2-3 guys. When you actually do it in the board, they are already on your side because they've seen it, they've given their input. Now they can't raise new objections. So in a sense, you've already sold the idea. You never go to a meeting cold and expect people to take a decision. You should have soaked them with the idea, got their inputs, pre-agreed in a sense. And then only the formal thing will happen properly. In Japan, it's called nemawashi.
Oh, yeah, they have terms for everything.
So nemawashi means uprooting a tree with the roots and replanting it somewhere, for which you have to prepare the ground properly so that the roots will take. So for a decision to work, you should have prepared the ground. That means all the guys involved should already have been exposed to the ideas that you're trying to put across.
Right.
You should have agreed or suggested their changes. You should have incorporated the changes. And now it's only a formality. And once that is done, then everybody is on the same, track. And there are no dissenters and this and that. So we learned a lot of these little things, decision making, and making presentations.
And what next? What after that?
So then after that, I was transferred to Bangalore to head the animal feeds business.
Back to animal feed.
By that time, animal feeds had gone to Lipton, then become part of Lipton Brook Bond, and the headquarters was in Bangalore because that was the headquarters of that company. In 1984, it had been transferred to Lipton. Animal feeds and dalda, fats, etc. were transferred by Hindustan Lever to Lipton. Okay. And there's a recent book written by Mr. R. Gopalakrishnan and Rishi Bhattacharya on this whole story and the transformation of these companies and what are the lessons we learned, etc. It's been just published now, and we'll be talking about it with. I'll be talking to both of them at the Bangalore International Center on this book in June.
Okay.
So anyway, Gopal at that time was the head of Brook Bond Limited and vice chairman of Hindustan Lever. So he asked me to come to Bangalore, reporting to him again, and heading the animal feeds business. The animal feeds business, as I told you, was the most profitable business in Hindustan Lever, and it remains so. I'm coming back after 12, 13 years. It was growing at 20+% a year. Return on investment post-tax was 100%. Okay. And within a year of my taking over, I tried to convince them that it's time to sell this business. It took a lot of convincing.
But why, sir?
Because the industry had changed a lot. We had no... Hindustan Lever no longer had enough expertise. Unilever had gotten out of the business. Originally, we got into the business because it was a global business. But Unilever had exited that business 10, 15 years before. So we were... And in a big company, you can't have, standalone businesses. It's always fighting against the current, in a sense, right? It's not core to the organization. Therefore, there's relatively little investment in R&D and development and so on. Plus, the industry has changed a lot. So broilers in particular, bulk of the money was coming from broiler feed. The whole world has moved to integrated broiler industry. For example, take Tyson Foods in the US, which is the biggest in the world. They have the hatcheries that produce the chicks, that produce the thing, and then they farm it. They have franchisee or third-party farmers who are just paid per chick. They give them the chicks and they want it back at particular weight, at particular thing. They provide the feed, they take it back, they have the processing plants, they supply to KFC and blah, 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 whoever, right? So they own everything. It's an integrated operation. And that was already happening here. So with an integrated operation, you have no chance of being just a feed supplier. So it took a while to convince them to do this, and at every stage, right? First I had to convince Gopal, then he left, joined the Tatas, and I convinced K.K. Dadiseth, who was the chairman of Hindustan Lever. Then he agreed. And he said, okay, we don't know anything about it. You have to get the buyers and all. I brought all the buyers from abroad. I suggested the price. By the time I had resigned and left the company. When the buyers came, I was in my next job. But I was asked to make presentations to them.
Wow.
Because no one else was there in the company who could do it. And so every potential buyer who came met me, even though I was no longer in the company, to get a briefing and so on. Unfortunately, by that time, Unilever said the same arguments. Why do you want to sell such a beautiful business, blah, blah, blah. Again, the whole process had to be, to convince them. That delayed the whole thing. And then they also said, you need to get bids from many people rather than only the first one, which was a great bid. They didn't accept. And then time passed by and the value started dropping. And so we ended up with very bad value on the whole thing. Because the whole sale process was then, got delayed and didn't work well. Anyway, I was no longer there, but that happened. Yeah, then I moved to a company called Bombay Burmah Trading Corporation. It was an opportunity for me to be the CEO of a company, of a good large company. Bombay Burmah is the oldest listed company in India. It was listed the day the Bombay Stock Exchange was formed. Also had a great history, was considered one of the blue chips for a long time. Was in multiple businesses, but there were problems and needed turning around. It was controlled by the Wadias. By then, earlier it was a multinational. Anyway, it was very interesting, but the equation didn't work well with Mr. Wadia. And so I had to leave after a year and a half. Thereafter, I was looking for something else, and then I joined this a company, a German specialty lubricant company. And I joined them in 2000, and I was there for 16 and a half years till I retired. So this company went through many phases, right? Initially, there was an NRI majority shareholder
Oh,
to an Indian company. And he was an NRI, but his Indian company was the majority shareholder. And the foreign shareholding was with two German companies. After 2 or 3 years, the main German company got bought over by a large German group. And then I had to, rejigger the whole thing. Means we had to buy out these German companies, then later buy out the Indian shareholder, the NRI, and we became part of this bigger group, globally, well-known global family-owned company called Freudenberg. And I was with them for, as I said, overall in this job for 16 and a half years. After a while, I started taking over. I also ran Asia Pacific for this company. And then they acquired an American company in another related business.
All the while you were based in Bombay itself?
No, in Bangalore. This last job I was in
Bangalore. This was in Bangalore itself. Okay.
In Bombay, Burmah, I was in Bombay.
And you moved back to Bangalore.
For this job, I came to Bangalore. So 16 and a half years I was there. It was an interesting journey. I also handled this American company. I was on their global executive committee and handled India and regions. And I helped them in many other activities, right? Which maybe we can discuss in the next phase or something. So that was the end of the working. So I worked basically in four organizations. Right? So Tata, Hindustan Lever, Bombay, Burmah, and then this German thing. I retired 7.5, nearly 8 years ago, and started the next phase of doing other things. Maybe that too we can talk about in the next phase. So this was the formal career.
Wonderful. I just, as a last question in this section would be, so you worked for 4 very large corporations. 3 of them are global corporations. One of them is that a global corporate? It's one of the oldest Indian listed companies, and it is kind of Indian multinational. Indian multinational it is. But of course, family-run business. While the last one also, you said it's a family-run business, was it? The German corporation?
It's a German family-owned.
Family-owned, but professionally managed.
Yeah.
Whereas
it's 10, 12 billion in size, 55,000 people.
So how do you look back and look at this near 40 years, right? Near 35 years in these 4 companies.
40 and a half years.
40 and a half. And out of which, of course, perhaps if you want to leave out Bombay, Burmah, because it's less than 2 years.
Yeah.
So between these 3 companies, among them, again, between 2 of them, you spent nearly 30 years, right?
Yeah. More than 30 years. More than 30.
More than 30. Only
34 years between 2 of them, and 5.5 years in nearly 34, 33 and a half, 5.5 in Tata. Yeah.
So where do you regard your, apart from the position point of view, right? Obviously at the last corporation, you were in the board impacting globally and all that. Apart from the position power point of view, where do you personally have that feeling of having that high, that was those were the best times of my life? Where do you regard?
I think all along in
All along.
every job, every individual job, not just each company,
Correct.
there were different jobs. So at
Right.
different points, different jobs, there was fun at that time. They were always fun. I mean, I just gave you a few, let's say, examples of
Right. Right.
unusual incidents. Uh, so like that, there was always something exciting happening. The
And
fun was there throughout.
and anywhere, absolutely no regret at any point of time that you wish you had spent or done this, done that more.
Probably I could have left the Tata Administrative Service a year or two earlier.
Okay.
In the last 2 years were kind of, you know, not kind of marching on the same spot. But that's a minor thing in a journey of 40 years, 2 years is neither here nor there. Every day you're learning something new.
Right. Wonderful. Well, uh, is there anything you want to share with? I mean, obviously you shared your whole journey, but as put it in a capsule of your 40 years to our audience and listeners.
I mean, I just think that but the key is not to have regrets. You're always asking me any regrets. And I think A, no regret. B, I'm not constantly comparing and looking around. There were people who are always looking out. Am I progressing fast enough? Am I getting the promotion? And always in the market looking for a job, but not actually going anywhere. I feel that keeps you A, from performing your own job well, and B, kind of confused in your head. You're not focused where you are. Once in 10 years, okay, you have to sort of, reevaluate where am I in life and am I in the right place and all that kind of thing. But if you do it every day, you're in trouble because you'll be unhappy regardless of how good things are. You'll still be unhappy, right? So I think the concept of position and competition with other people is death for enjoying your life.
Sorry, I said last question, but one last question. So, what prepared you to have this approach? Was that your schooling, or was that your family, or was that your times you spent at IIT, or which one prepared you most to have this outlook of?
I don't think it was any of those. I think I just learned it along the way. When you obviously sometimes you feel disappointed, you thought you should get a promotion, you didn't get it, or it got delayed, or whatever. After a point, you start saying, you can't be bothered about this on a daily basis. Sometimes it comes faster than you think, sometimes it comes slower than you think. It's all part of life and it evens out. Just do your job well and enjoy it every day. When you do your job well, people will see it and you will get your just rewards.
You seem to have this almost right from your beginning of your career, this outlook, but which was probably unique, right? I mean, it's not that you attribute it to
I think
some point
everybody learns it.
in
The
their own way.
question is learning it earlier rather than later.
Right. Wonderful. Thank you so much,
Pleasure.
Viju. And I some of the audience and listeners do write and do reach. We will talk about what keeps his new innings busy, which he did mention briefly. So share your feedback. Do follow him. The social handles are there right below this podcast. Follow the follow to hear and keep track of what keeps him busy, and also to get so much of learning out of it. Thank you so much, and do share this conversation with all those you think appreciate it. Viju, once again, thank you so much for sharing your journey with us.
Thank you. Thank you.